Hello and welcome to Suzi's Book Bag. Today's guest is an author whose work ranges across time and space and will utterly boggle your mind. She's the author of children's books and literary novels, a how-to guide, a how-to-write guide, and she's got very interesting forthcoming news about her next book. I'm very delighted to be inviting an old friend and a writer I admire hugely into the book bag, and it's Scarlett Thomas. Welcome, Scarlett.
Hi, Suzi. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's lovely to have you. I have put up a Scribner bag as the featured tote bag because you've got quite good news to tell us, I believe, about what's coming up for you. Are you allowed to tell us a bit about your next book?
I don't know, but I'm going to anyway.
That's the spirit.
I think I'm just allowed to say something about it. So it's called The Sleepwalkers, and it is out next April. I think it's April the 9th with Simon and Schuster in the US and April the 11th with Scribner in the UK. So I'm super excited and happy about it. And I'm loving the bag.
Yeah, I have a whole range of bags, so I was wondering what would be suitable for this chat. It was almost going to be the Michael Joseph Mermaid because you live by the sea, and you're very influenced by place, aren't you? In your writing, you've moved about quite a bit, and your novels tend to be set where you're living. So, do we have is that the case for this new book coming up?
Yes, and I actually know you don't know anything about it, so it's almost as if I primed you because it's so much is. I went on a kind of slightly bad holiday. It was a great holiday in some ways, but it was also a bad holiday to a Greek island. I can never say which one. And yeah, there was kind of having one of my many kind of minor breakdowns and stayed in this hotel that had a very, very strange woman owner who did that thing which I hadn't really experienced before, where she was really nice to my male partner and really horrible to me. And when I said to him, "Don't you think she's a bit weird?" He was like, "No, she's lovely. What's wrong with you?" And and I became fascinated with this dynamic of, what's it like when women sort of gaslight each other a bit, or also, was I imagining it? Had I just got a bit hot and I was a bit mental? And so was my partner right that I was just seeing things that weren't there? And so when I got back, I thought, what, that was a really interesting experience. And so I wrote down quite a lot of the detail of it, and then started to fictionalize it. And then it turned into The Sleepwalkers, where the couple in The Sleepwalkers have just got married and they're on this fictional Greek island for their honeymoon, and they basically break up, and it's very toxic and it all goes horribly wrong. And yeah, it's kind of heightened and hot and gothic and dark, and it's kind of darkly funny. But it's got all of these big reveals. So I was really influenced by sensation fiction. And so it's got that. I really want to affect the reader physically. So I want them to kind of go, at least 5 times during the book.
Have you ever read The Magus, which is also largely set on a Greek island?
No, that
John
could even
Fowles.
be, yeah, no, that's one of those books that I've meant to read and haven't. But who was it who famously said that if they could have their life over again, they wouldn't read The Magus?
I can't
That put
remember,
me
but
off.
it's a good quote. Well, I say that I think it's the sort of thing. If you're beyond your teenage years, don't bother with it. But if you are a
Right.
teenager, you'll think it's the most amazing book that has ever been written.
I
And
am a
it was,
teenager,
yeah, we're
as
all
you can see.
teenagers. I should reread it again, actually. But we all passed it around at school. And I know you went to boarding school. I was at boarding school for a while. and whoever had the copy of the Magus was just left alone. Leave her alone. She's reading the Magus. Oh, okay. And then there would come a moment when the person would go, "Oh my God, no!" And then we'd all nod sagely and go, "She's got to that bit." So
oh, see, you make it sound more appealing than whoever it was that said that thing about living their life again. No, at my school we passed around Sidney Sheldon.
Yeah. Oh, well, just as good.
Less intellectual than your score.
Well, I think the thing about the Magus is that people think it's sort of pseudo-intellectual. People think that it's got a weird ending, and you know it's almost that Rilke kind of "you must change your life."
Oh, I want
thing.
that.
And then you're sort of, but I don't know how. I don't know what it means. But
oh God, did you just say she for Sidney Sheldon, by the way?
I don't think so, because I know Sidney Sheldon is a he.
So
but
I thought it was a she for about 30 years and only recently found out that it was a he, and it ruined the whole thing.
There were those great big bunk bastards, weren't there? I mean, I did read that sort of stuff as well. I remember reading Airports.
Oh God, yes. Oh, Jackie Collins, me and my mum would kind of pass those between us on holidays, and I think my life was ruined by Jackie Collins, I have to say.
Oh, that could be the tagline, couldn't it? You know, if you ever write a memoir.
Another one.
Did you ever meet her?
No.
I met her a couple of times. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, just
so
glam to the max. Glam to the max. You know,
I'd love
amazing.
to be like that. Oh.
I've got a promotional Jackie Collins leopard print nail file. The things that publishers give out to celebrate novels. Actually, I should have dug it out. I've got a little badge that says "The End of Mr. Y." A little tin badge.
God, I don't think I've even got any of those anymore. Oh, how cool! You could probably flog that on eBay for about $2.99.
As much as that? Wow. No, I think I'll keep it in the hope that it goes up. Okay, so I've dug out a few of the books that I have. I'm sure I have all your books, but it's just very difficult to locate them all. But look at this, Bright Young Things.
Oh, yay! That's from a long time ago.
It's from a long time ago, and it's got a rather puzzling cover line: "A break for the big time." But Loaded call it compulsive and edgy. Loaded. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
What happened to Loaded?
Was that a sort of a kind of big brother idea? Sort of, it's a load of people going mad on an island, isn't it? A load of young people.
Yes, so I have to never speak to you again now, because you've already said the most annoying thing that everybody said about Bright Young Things, because I wrote it way before Big Brother or Castaway, all of that were even announced. I think I just must have heard the same kind of zeitgeisty waves.
You gave them the idea.
Well, no, because by the time the book came out, that stuff had happened, and then everyone said, "Oh, it's a satire on Big Brother," and I was like, "No, it was my idea first. You don't understand how the publishing industry works and how long it takes to publish sodding books." I still feel slightly bitter about it. But I guess they all came out the same moment of, I don't know, wanting to just analyze people in these natural groups and see, you put a group of slightly different people together and see how they talk. Although with Bright Young Things, my idea was, what if all these people are essentially the same? So they're all young people. I mean, they're not all completely middle class. There's 3 guys, 3 young women. And they just talk about video games and pop culture for a whole book, and that's it.
And that was where you were coming from at the time.
Yeah,
video games.
Yes, and my publisher at the time was Hodder, and they were very patient with me, and they gently said, "This has no story. Could you put in a murder?" So I did. I put in a murder.
Because you'd written a few books to begin with. Are they the books we don't talk about?
It might be long enough that we do talk about them now.
Okay.
Oh,
I don't want to annoy you anymore after the big Big Brother statement.
Well, yeah. When I started writing, I literally knew nothing about the publishing industry. I didn't know about genres. I didn't even know that, for example, people felt that a certain type of book was a prize-winning kind of book, and another type of book was just to take on your holiday, or to get up the library and never talk about with your friends. So I was a real innocent newbie, fish out of water type person in the publishing industry. So I'd written this quite dark literary novel about a group of students who never leave the house. Again, anticipating the pandemic by about, I don't know, 25 years.
How do you do it?
And I was like, oh, there's this new thing I think I've heard of where you can order groceries online. And so I wrote some of that book and showed it to an agent, and she said, oh, this is really good, can you send the rest? And I hadn't written the rest, so I wrote the rest over the weekend, sent it to her, and she was like, this seems a bit hurried. And I was like, oh, screw you then. I just didn't know what I was doing. I said, well, shall I write women's crime fiction, because that's what my mum likes. And she said, yeah, if you like, just finish something and send it to me. So I probably should have finished the literary novel, which is still in a drawer. But I do love a murder mystery. I kind of I love that sort of whodunit genre. I love cozy crime on TV. I'm a massive fan of the whole Inspector Morse universe and everything like that. So I invented a detective called Lily Pascal, who's half French, which is what I wanted to be. I'm half something, but not exactly French. And then, I wrote these 3 crime novels. But when my first one was published, that was when I realised that the people that wrote literary fiction were, in one room, and the people that wrote crime fiction had to wait in the corridor a little bit, and it was kind of odd. But I think they only published 500 copies of my first hardback, and men would queue up with bin bags to get me to sign it and then wrap them up and put them in their attics forevermore because of the collection value. So that was exciting. Right. So then it took me quite a long time to be taken seriously as somebody who wanted to write fiction that wasn't crime fiction. And whenever I talk about this, by the way, I get it wrong and I upset everybody that writes crime fiction. So maybe that's all I'm going to say. But no, I love those books. They were so much fun to write. And it's a very hard genre to get right as well.
I think we'll just say that's what it was like back then. It's not like that now.
It's not like that.
We revere our crime novelists.
We do. Yeah, we absolutely do. But I think it's still, actually, though, on behalf of all of those novelists, I think it probably still is quite annoying when certain types of fiction are taken a lot more seriously than other types. That is all I will say.
And so moving on from the crime novels, what was Bright Young Things your kind of debut as a something else type of writer?
Yeah, although I was really trying to be a very much something else type of writer, and Hodder were like, but can we have a murder? So, or at least I think we negotiated and arrived at a dead body. I think it's very hard, or it certainly was then, perhaps it is a bit easier now, but it's very hard to get out of your publishing box once you've been put into one. That's certainly true. Bright Young Things was my sort of first kind of general fiction type novel.
And PopCo came next. Was that right?
No, Going Out came next.
Oh yes, Going Out. You'll have to remind me about that one, because PopCo is the vegan kind of activist one, isn't it?
Yeah, and Going Out is the one where it's 2 friends who live next door to each other, and Luke is allergic to the sun and can't go outside, and Julie is afraid of everything and doesn't want to go outside. So they live this, again, there's a bit of a theme, isn't there? People, young Generation X people in enclosed spaces eating pot noodles and talking about video games. But they decide to go on a road trip in a little camper van to go to Wales, where there's somebody who can maybe cure Luke. And yeah, I might be having a conversation about turning that into a film or a TV series soon. So that's exciting.
Do you ever reread them, the early books?
No, well, no. The embarrassing thing is I sort of forget details from them, which you definitely don't think would happen to you. When you're dreaming about being a novelist or being published, you definitely don't think a period of time will pass and you'll forget that you ever wrote the thing. That was very important to you at the time. But no, I don't. I did actually. I reread Bright Young Things not that long ago because I wrote a new introduction for Cannongate's version of it, and I thought, oh, this isn't bad actually. I quite like this. That was nice.
So, what about the anthology that you were involved in that had a manifesto, and that was the New Puritans?
Worse
that must
than
have been
that.
about 2000.
All Hail the New Puritans is what it was
Oh,
called.
that's right. That's the title of a Fall song, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was organised by Matt Thorne and Nick Blinko. And yeah, all kinds of people in that. Alex Garland, Toby Litt, Rebecca Ray. We all went for a photo shoot for the Sunday Times and hung out. It was really fun. But I think we came over like a bunch of massive wankers, if I'm honest. That's fine.
As soon as you have a manifesto, an angry manifesto.
Well, I love a manifesto, and the Futurist manifesto is one of my favourite things. I love any manifesto, just how crazy they sound. We're going to do this from now on forever.
I think it's no more pasta or something, isn't it? I don't know, or maybe that was just Marinetti. Somebody said pasta is enfeebling the Italian notion. We must have no more of it.
Did they? Because I actually think that's true. That's interesting. I would go along with that. But no, there's that great line about how they're gonna when they hit 30, I think, which is old, they're gonna go to a sad hangar, like an aircraft hangar in the countryside, and burn all their books, because that's the dignified thing to do when you get old. Just burn everything and go away and die.
Oh, they must have been very young. Did you know the Adam Ant song Futurist Manifesto? It's I think it's on the first Adam and the Ants LP, and it's rather good. I mean, what a brilliant LP that is. Somebody just gives themselves permission to write a song that says, you know, the Italian futurist, listen to this. And it's also how you remember all their names, because it's got a very catchy chorus line. So what was the idea of new Puritanism then? Because I don't know if anybody quite believed it at the time or even followed it through.
You'd be surprised. Do you remember Darren King?
Oh, I do. Boxy and Star,
which is a great novel. And Darren was a wonderful person and presence around the writing scene at that time. But he wrote, maybe it wasn't for New Puritans, but around that time he wrote Jim Giraffe, that had a character called Nicholas Bingo. Oh, those were the days. These millennials don't know what they've missed out on. So the idea was, I'm trying to remember, it was stuff like write simple sentences, and we eschewed something. I can't remember what.
That's always good to eschew, isn't it?
It's quite hard to say as well. We vowed to only write about real stuff in the present. So, you know, your kind of PlayStation and your, I don't know, like Finder's crispy pancakes or whatever. There were some other ones. It went on for quite a long time.
Yeah, it was quite demanding, as I recall. I probably still got the anthology somewhere, and a lot of the names, people did go on and do interesting stuff. So it was well brought together, I think, by Blinko and Thorne.
Yeah.
So I'll go on to the next book that I've just managed to pull. So this is beautiful, isn't it? This beautiful
Yes, but you've missed
hardback.
PopCo now. Or
Oh
have we
no, I've
done
missed
PopCo with the
PopCo.
vegan
Well, I haven't
thingy?
got PopCo, but let's go on.
Oh,
That is a good point, because I did have questions about PopCo. So my idea about PopCo is also about the seed collectors, which comes much later on, and this is your amazing commitment to like the novels change your life, at least for the moment, don't they? And you wrote about veganism, and you were a vegan for a long time, weren't you?
yeah, I have been in, yeah, I guess for quite a long time, this idea of a sort of gonzo fiction where you kind of throw yourself into it and then almost become the character that you're writing about, or you take on their hobbies or problems. And my latest thing is I like writing in the place that I'm writing about, which I guess is a basic thing, but anyway. I had been a vegetarian for years, and I'm always very affected by books that I read. So I'd read, in fact, it was when I was reviewing for you. That's right. And
You owe
when I
me
was
so
doing,
much, Scarlett, so
I
much.
do almost everything. Yeah, because I was reviewing paperbacks for you, and I was on one week and off the next week, and
Yeah.
it was me one week, then Murrah, and I got given all the weird food and science books. I can't remember what he got given, so I was
Maths.
I
You got
I
maths
liked
books
maths,
as
yeah.
well, yeah.
But for a while, there were quite a lot of these books, which I actually think gave me an eating disorder, which I've since written about, called orthorexia. Where so these books were all about things like, if you go to a fast food restaurant in the US, they will cut your lettuce with the same knife they used to cut the chicken. You will die. And by the way, factory farming is awful, and here's an in-depth description of what happens in a slaughterhouse, etc., etc. So yeah, I think reading a lot of that type of book made me feel like I wanted to be more kind of mindful and conscious about what I ate and what I did. So yeah, eventually I ended up being a vegan, and so yeah, I wrote about that, and a kind of politics of resistance, which I was thinking about a lot at that time. And when I wrote PopCo, it was the first time I used a kind of idea generation sort of technique to think about how I wanted to put together lots of different ideas. But it's a bit meta because I was researching what they call ideation. So PopCo's set in a kind of toy company, and it's completely evil, and it's like, let's come up with ideas for things we can sell to kiddies and make them addicted. And our heroine Alice Butler works there at PopCo. So I got all these books about ideation and marketing and so on. And I thought, well, do you know what? These people are kind of evil. That's true. On the other hand, these techniques are pretty good. I'm going to use them. So I ended up using some of those ideation techniques to have the idea and to develop the ideas in PopCo, which has a crossword, a vegan cake recipe, loads of stuff about maths, cryptography, and veganism. Yes.
Well, I mean, I would categorize all of your novels, and most of the ones that I've read, in many ways as novels of ideas. And if we do go on to the end of Mr. Y, that's just got so much going on it. I've got this lovely
Look at that.
hardback, look at it. And it's, you can't really tell, it's a beautiful format. It's kind of taller and thinner than a normal hardback. And I was amazed to find I have kept the press release.
God, they don't even give authors the press release. I've got no idea what they said.
Oh, well, it's very interesting, actually. And you got some great quotes. You got quotes from Philip Pullman, Douglas Coupland, and Jonathan Coe on the back. The
Philip
end of
Pullman wrote a letter about he liked it, but the breathless sex scene in the Little Chef toilet troubled him for a reason I can't remember now. I think that's right. It was the first person narration. He felt that if you were busy, I might be sorry, Philip, if you're out there and you're listening to this, and I'm misquoting or
respect to
misremembering.
Philip, always.
Yes, but it was about how third person would have been more effective than first person, particularly if one happened to be having frantic sex in a Little Chef toilet and didn't feel capable of recording that experience at the time. Anyway, but otherwise he liked it, thus the quote.
Yes, well, ingenious and original, cracking good yarn, fizzing with intelligence, according to Philip. Douglas Coupland says The End of Mr. Y is a masterpiece. Jonathan Coe, one of the most exciting novels I've read in recent years. And you were voted one of the UK's 20 best young writers by The Independent on Sunday. My hand might have been in there somewhere. That was probably the sort of thing where they come to the literary editor and go, do a list. So, and then there's stuff about the other books. There's praise for Scarlett Thomas, PopCo, a novel of ideas and their power, richly elusive, freewheeling, enormously satisfying, like a dreamland collaboration between Douglas Coupland, Naomi Klein, and Douglas R. Hofstadter. I don't actually know who that is. Jonathan Coe again. This is my quote. No heroine this year was more beguiling than Alice in Scarlett Thomas's PopCo. This book might just change your life. I think I was talking about the veganism. Kim Newman liked it. Big zeitgeisty novel that free associates in the way that only cyberpunk science fiction used to be able to do.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
That's a nice one, isn't it? Going Out again, Coupland, Scarlett Thomas, this is from the Times. Scarlett Thomas captures perfectly the estuarine suburbs where a lack of blonde highlights makes you a weirdo and where eccentrics are nevertheless stashed behind every home base bought door. Rather good. Because you were born in Essex, weren't you? Aren't you estuarine?
No, I'm from London originally, but I did live in Essex when I was a child.
Right. The New Yorker, like it. But the really interesting thing about all these quotes is that I don't know whether they're just selected this way by Canongate, but they don't give any idea. There's no, this is a book about. And I think maybe your books aren't really all that easy to, this is a book about a heroine who, certainly The End of Mr. Y, I would hesitate. I mean, it's got Apollo in it.
Apollo Smithius,
mice.
8-foot mouse god. But actually, The End of Mr. Y is maybe the easiest one to tell people about. It's basically Ariel Manto, who's an impoverished student who has bad sex with the wrong men, wanders into a secondhand bookshop one day and finds the cursed book that she's been studying on her PhD, of which there are only a couple of copies in the world. Buys it, reads it, gets cursed, goes on an adventure, maybe dies.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to it than that. I seem to remember portals and lots of maths. These books that I was sending you. So tell us about. So Ariel Manto, that means something, doesn't it? As a name, that's not just a cool name, although it is.
It's an anagram. Which I shall leave your viewers to work out.
I'm terrible at anagrams. Okay, and then tell us about the mouse god.
Apollo Smithius, the mouse god. Yeah. So Ariel goes off into the troposphere, which is this kind of other dimension that has only been described by this 19th century writer called Thomas Loomis, and there she finds these kind of strange landscapes with not much in them, and then riding up on a scooter I think, is this 8-foot mouse god called Apollo Smintheus, who is her sort of guide in this other world.
And you didn't just make that up, did you? There was a, I mean, he's one of the attributes. It's one of the attributes of the god Apollo. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of, but definitely not the way I did it. It's
No.
a kind of almost a deliberate misreading. He's, but he is the god of mice, I think. And so I took that and ran with it and made him a mouse, but I don't think in any other place he's ever been a mouse that talks.
But it's just great to get mice in, really, isn't it? You said something to me years ago that was one of the most useful bits of literary criticism I think I've ever heard from anybody. I've taught it to students, and the students all nod sagely, and that is invariably when a novelist, even a literary novelist, introduces an animal or a pet, especially a pet, it's either a metaphor or, you know, it becomes a symbol of something, but it will generally die, and it will die horribly, and that will be a kind of meaningful plot point. And I became completely obsessed with this. So any kind of book where it says, and her little dog runs into the room, I'm really like, don't you touch that dog.
Yeah, 100%.
She
Well,
has
do you remember?
adorable cat. You better not kill the cat. And it's
No,
in films as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's Aristotle's principle of reversal, which I've taken to calling mirroring with my students, which they prefer to reversal. It's the same thing where, yeah, if something's happy at the beginning, it's going to be sad by the end. So if you've got a nice fluffy pet at the beginning, it's going to be toast by the end. But I really don't like reading about nasty things happening to animals. So, but if you remember when I reviewed for you on the Cindy that we had a star system for the paperbacks.
Yeah.
And I was quite clear with you that if a book had an animal in it, I think it got an extra star. But if the animal died, I think it lost 4 stars. Which you were fine about.
Yeah. Absolutely your choice. I mean, I'm sometimes the same with students. I explain at the beginning that, like, yeah, do this and you'll lose half a grade. And they're just all so terrified. It's hilarious.
I
know. But there's certain things, you know, don't split your infinitives or whatever it is. You know? Don't use the Oxford comma.
No, God, I hate the Oxford comma. It's awful. So what I tell mine now, because I've gone soft now, I tell mine, look, if you use an Oxford comma or split an infinitive or mess something up, sure, you're going to lose a couple of points. But because we now have the categorical marking scheme and grade inflation, I'm going to have to give you those points back anyway. So I don't care what you do anymore.
Well, let's move on to our tragic universe, because that is the one that I mean deliberately does have a delightful pet, and the delightful pet is still happy at the end.
Yes,
you know. So sod off, Aristotle. This dog will live to fight another day.
Absolutely, yes. B. Based on my lovely dog Dreamer, who is no more and who I still mourn every day, many more than 10 years after I lost her. So yeah.
Is it that long ago?
Yeah.
I remember the game on the stairs where she taught you the rules. She knew what the rules for the tennis ball on the stairs game was. So if you didn't do it right, she'd just look at you. And then, so you had to learn the rules. It was great.
She had amazing eyes. And if I'd leave her with a stranger, she'd just do an eye flick, which was just to the treats drawer. And they'd eventually think, well, what's she telling me? I'm just going to go and open that drawer and see what's in it. And then they would find the treats. And then, you know, she would get the treats. So, no, she was incredibly clever. I mean, I could never, ever have another dog because she was just the dog. She was amazing. So, but yeah, I fictionalized. She was book dog. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was set. Was that Dartmouth or Totnes? You were living down in Devon at the time, were
Yeah,
you? Have I got
so
that right? Yeah.
I was, and that one is set pretty much in Dartmouth,
Mm.
and then the surrounding areas. There's the Beast, which is kind of maybe fictional and maybe not. That's kind of roaming Dartmoor and the surrounding areas, and so there's a bit of a climax in Totnes where the Beast eats someone. Character that I'd got a bit sick of, and I said to my mum, I think I'm just gonna. I don't usually talk to my mum about my plots, and one of the few times I did, I said, you know what, I've got this really irritating character, and I don't want to write this final big scene with him that I'd had planned, so I'm just going to have him eaten by the Beast. And to this day, she still brings this up and says, I can't believe that your plotting is so shoddy that you just one day decided to have your character eaten by a beast. So
Isn't that the joy of it, though?
Yeah, it can be.
I just love that idea. I'll just push them off a cliff, like, oh, something outlandish is going to happen. I'm just not dealing with it anymore.
Readers don't like it. Well, it's not the way you're meant to do it, and I don't usually. I think it did make sense in Our Tragic Universe. Our Tragic Universe is a strange one. It really divides people because I think there were a lot of people that read the end of Mr. Y and wanted the same thing again. And Our Tragic Universe is a much quieter, I don't know, perhaps more personal kind of book. But the people that really love it really do love it. It's their favourite.
Do you find that you have fans that go from book to book, or is it a kind of lose some, get some different ones with each book?
No, they're all the same. I think I know all their names.
All 25 of them. Or...
yeah, 37. I'm not even joking. Yeah, the end of Mr. Y got a lot of new readers, and then they all went away again with Our Tragic Universe, and so I was back to the same 37. Yeah, I mean, there are, I suppose, new people do come on board for new books, but it's funny how the publishing industry works, as you know, and how and when you get new readers and how big the books are, and how widely known they are, where they're put in the bookshop, and so on. So it's completely possible to publish a book and no one really knows that you have published a book. So that's interesting as well. So the bigger books obviously generate more fans or readers.
And so I want to move to, well, let's do Seed Collectors, actually, which I've got somewhere. I just couldn't locate it. So that is different again. You've got this quite large family, a large scale novel. But the interesting thing about that is you kind of did a degree in order to write it, or you were doing the degree, and like it just seemed sort of taking your process to the ultimate limit, really, doing a degree in botany, wasn't it?
Ethnobotany, yes.
Ethnobotany.
Ethnobotany, which is plants and people.
I think you said once it's people smoking stuff.
Yeah, basically, or rubbing stuff on them, or like rolling around in leaves, or making cloaks out of stuff.
Right,
but basically, yeah, drugs, alcohol, like plants, it turns out. So there I was, this vegan, and I thought that plants were, lovely, beautiful, swaying in the wind type things that were good for you and wanted your health and joyful things. And it turns out there is an argument that plants want to enslave us and then kill us, and just kind of, program us to plant, fields of soya and wheat and so on, and then become these kind of robotic servants that do whatever plants want. This is real, it's out there. Thus, going back to the evil pasta idea, the pasta makes you kind of feel a bit sort of crazed and want more pasta. And then you have to go and plant the wheat to make the pasta, and then before you know it, you are the servants of pasta. Which I didn't develop that idea in full in the book, but it was fascinating to find, the most addictive substances in the world are all plants. Tobacco, alcohols fermented from plants, all interesting drugs come from plants.
Killers, basically, aren't they? Killer plants are a thing.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. And there were the ones that eat flies and all of that too. But yeah, that was the book where I really took my idea of doing real research for a novel super seriously. So I signed up for the MSc in ethnobotany at the University of Kent. And I was just a terrible student. I really came up against myself because, for example, I'm usually the teacher, right? So I get to stand in the best spot in the classroom, and then everyone else goes down the other end. And then on ethnobotany, I had to sit really close to the other students, and I wasn't the most important person in the room. I think I discovered that I was a terrible narcissist, actually. And so that was weird. And then I couldn't identify plants. I just couldn't. They, put a plant in front of you and you were supposed to do all these things to it. And I could virtually not identify a daisy using the scheme that you're supposed to use. But we'd go to Kew Gardens and look at the ethnobotany collection there, which is amazing. And yeah, so I started off, the book was supposed to be about these botanists that go off into the rainforest and find stuff. And it's actually, again, I thought they were boring, so I killed them. And it's their offspring who are left behind that you follow. And, they're all kind of quite fucked up, normal-ish people. And there's a cursed plant rather than a cursed book. And it's written in a kind of free and direct style, like a type of third person where you can plunge into people's minds and know what they're thinking and then whiz off somewhere else. And I was really experimenting with that style in that book.
How do you feel about the statement that is often handed out to novelists that, they're so unlikable? It's a sort of prime reason for people turning stuff down, but Heathcliff isn't very likable. Catherine Earnshaw isn't very likable. It always slightly annoys me if that's used as a criticism.
Yeah, I have this a lot with students as well, because it's not really about likable. And I think, bless them, Netflix have done a lot recently to show people that it's more about relatability and characters who are fascinating, not characters who you just like. And I think their whole kind of, they've got a sort of sheet on how to create characters for their shows, and it's very much about that, what is this person's moral compass? And it doesn't matter if it's not, a perfect, shiny, standard moral compass, as long as we understand what they're trying to do and we buy into it. So I mean, I know we all hate the word relatability, but I think that's closer than likability. Having said that, I know where you're going with this. To what extent are the characters in The Seed Collectors A, likable, B, relatable? I mean, not that much. I like them. And I was going through a phase as well of thinking about very flawed people and kind of various religious ideas about universal love. And if you were going to adopt a godlike perspective, and if you could see into everyone's souls, however unlikable, unrelatable they seemed on the outside, you would sort of love them because you would understand where they were coming from, kind of. So that's what I'm exploring. But I think it was a bit much for some people, and it's got loads of sex in it, and including, I believe, sex with plants, and yeah. Oh, that's right. I went on television in Scotland, and I said to them, oh, so where do I go for hair and makeup? Like, we don't have hair and makeup. But you are here to talk about carnivorous plants and sex, which is what I believe you've written about. And I don't think I did really write that much about carnivorous plants and sex in the book, but I had to sort of pretend I had. That was a highlight of that book tour.
It's funny what people pick out, isn't it? So I want to move now to this amazing book, Monkeys with Typewriters. And that's, you talked about ideation earlier on. This, I mean, I've just flicked through and seen how to have ideas. This is maybe, if anything, your manifesto. It's a bit longer than the New Puritans manifesto. How to write fiction and unlock the secret power of stories. And it has sort of plot generation ideas in it. But there's quite a lot of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Is that something you teach?
No, not that much anymore. Although I do remember when we used to do lectures at the University of Kent, which we haven't actually done since I published that book, because that is kind of all my lectures. Didn't feel like I needed to give them once they were in a book, but I gave the Nietzsche lecture, and this very haggard young man stumbled over afterwards and said, "Please, I need to know where I can get a Nietzsche book now." So I directed him to the library. I guess Nietzsche's sort of an acquired taste, but just this, the stuff in The Birth of Tragedy about how tragedy speaks to us, speaks to that very primal part of us that knows we're going to die and can't quite cope with it, but needs stories about other people kind of trying to be glorious, trying to soar, trying to reach the sun on a little twig bicycle or whatever it was. What was it that Icarus had? Anyway, that type of thing. And how we aim for glory and then
I think
crash.
he had his dad's chariot, didn't he?
That's right.
He's a whiny kid. Go on, let me have a go. Let me have a go. Let me have a go. And then, it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, I think I might have mixed up the myth of Icarus with E.T. in my head.
But power of stories. A lot of you can take stories from myth and update them, can't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I must revisit some of that Nietzsche stuff. But it's interesting with students, because often they don't think about writing tragedy, but actually so many great books are tragic and do use a tragic structure, and I think it's really interesting to work with. And it's very powerful because if you do it right, it doesn't make you sad. It makes you feel kind of elevated and glorious and renewed or something.
And I think Apollo comes into the Birth of Tragedy as well, doesn't he?
Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Apollo and Dionysus. Yeah. I haven't thought about that stuff for a while. I wonder and obviously what we want is the Dionysic kind of mess. So, the idea, I guess, that a certain type of romantic comedy is Apolline. It's neat, it's structured, it's fine. But, tragedy has this kind of dark, complex glory behind it. I mean, they're fascinating ideas, and no, I love them. It's interesting in Monkeys with Typewriters. I think a lot about 3-act structure, and since then I've moved on to working with 5-act structure. So I'm kind of probably putting together a new book about writing, which incorporates all of the stuff I've learned since Monkeys with Typewriters, because I've been working in television a bit since then. So I've really had to think about quite intensive storytelling, and how that's different in television than in a novel. And so that's all very exciting. I love all of that.
I remember somebody has written a book about Act 4 in Shakespeare, the fourth act.
Oh God, how
And you
amazing! Because
can,
that's when everything goes wrong. Yeah.
yes, yeah, that's the sort of
Yeah.
fulcrum point,
Yeah.
isn't it? Sort of build,
Oh, who's that? I want to read
complexifies.
that.
I can't remember. It's just popped into my head now,
I'll
but I
look it
thought,
up.
what a fascinating idea. So you read all the act fours of
Wow,
especially
that's
the
brilliant.
tragedies, I
Yeah.
guess, and the problem plays, and see, oh, this is
Yes.
where the problems come in. So
Mm.
that's a great idea. So completely new, not updating monkeys with typewriters, just new thoughts on.
No, completely new. So I think it would sort of go on your bookshelf next to Monkeys with Typewriters
Right.
and be the next stage. Yeah, after all these
I'll
years of teaching, yeah.
I'll make space for it, not least because I've used so many of the ideas in Monkeys with Typewriters when I've done lectures.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, that's nice.
Well, I do put it on the reading list, so so
Thank you.
that's my little tip of the hat. So the next one, I mean, that's sort of Gothic is kind of a new exploration in a way, would you say? And have you been reading kind of classic Gothic novels, or are they just in your hinterland anyway?
No, I've been reading them, and yeah, there is that element of them just being there, of course, and it's a really interesting mode, the Gothic, I think, because once you get a taste for what it is, I guess it's like being bitten by a vampire or something. You sort of turn into it a little bit, and it comes, for me anyway, very naturally. So yeah, I think this is where maybe even having written it all down in Monkeys, and really spending that early part of my career doing so much research, in a way it was time to put all the research down and then just do something that was more voice driven and kind of experimental, and yeah, using a style like the Gothic. Yeah, yeah, kind of strange heightened sentences and that weird, the Gothic is always so oddly darkly funny, isn't it? I mean, even the worst bits of Wuthering Heights are kind of, there's something gruesomely funny about them. Maybe that's just me, maybe I'm weird.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I love about Wuthering Heights is it's sort of the fact that it got published at all, and sometimes what people would say now, like, oh, I mean, the Yorkshire dialect is terrible, isn't it? There's loads of.
I don't know. I thought it was really authentic.
It's probably authentic, but there's just something about the characters who they are comical, aren't they? There's this sort of miserable old git, isn't there, who talks all the time in Yorkshire dialect. Yeah, there is a humour there, definitely. But I think it's so misread as a book. So people desperately try to read it as a great romance, and it's like two complete psychos who it's like that thing about I think it was Thomas Carlyle and Jane Carlyle married each other so only two people would be unhappy rather than four. It's a bit like that in Wuthering Heights, isn't it? Like everybody marries exactly the wrong person and is absolutely driven crazy and miserable. And yeah, there's something. Yeah, it's a blast, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. It's an
amazing,
absolute blast of a book.
And I read The Woman in White for the first time actually last summer, and that's kind of fed into the Sleepwalkers as well, with the whole kind of sensation fiction thing and the revelations, and how, the minute you start reading The Woman in White, you get kind of hurled onto this roller coaster where, there's the secret with a capital S, and there's, this woman, and it's just, you kind of hurtle through it in this quite breathless way, don't you? And I wanted to write something like that. But when I wrote, I'm assuming you're talking about oligarchy though at the moment, and my kind of mascot book when I was writing that was The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. And so, I mean, not really Gothic exactly, but just sort of slightly twisted and short and dark and funny and tragic.
So is that a kind of, what were you doing there? Was that a sort of YA novel? Because you'd written the Worldquake children's novels that I thought were absolutely brilliant, that have the ideas that are in your literary fiction, but they're kind of, given a bit of a C.S. Lewis kind of twist to them to, bring the kids into your world.
You get it. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I felt that very much when I was writing them. So yeah, there are 3 of those. And when I talked about those books for the first time with my editor at Canongate, I said, this is basically the end of Mr. Y, but for children. He was like, where do I sign? And, they were great about those books and really kind of got behind Dragon's Green, which is the first one. And I just had this nervous breakdown playing tennis for a year, which led to my tennis memoir, 41 Love, which you might not even have a copy of. Maybe you do.
No, I don't think I do. I don't think I have that. Yeah.
It was only published in the US.
Ah.
Because it was too dark and too mental for here, apparently. But it's the story of this year, just prior to my writing those children's books, where I decided I was going to do one of those, super kind of gonzo projects where you do a mad thing for a year and then write a book about it. And so my thing was to see how far I could get playing tennis as a 41-year-old woman. So in the over 40s world of tennis, how far could I get? And I actually got to number 6 in the UK, but it was only because there were only, I think, about 7 women over 40 playing tennis in the UK. So, one of them sprained her ankle. And so anyway, I was really rubbish, but nevertheless, I decided I was going to train like a professional athlete. So I did, weightlifting and I was playing tennis for about 8 hours a day. And then I kind of overdid it and had to go and lie down for about 3 months. And when I woke up from that, I think I'd kind of reconnected to a lot of that archetypal stuff and kind of, Jungian psychoanalysis. And I really like James Hollis as a reader. As a writer, do you know of him? He wrote a book called What Matters Most, which was chosen by maybe Oliver Berkman, but somebody in The Guardian, I think, as their book of a lifetime. But whoever wrote about it started by saying, this book is so dark, you might not be able to read it, but it will help you. It's something like that. And I don't know, it just spoke to me. It's true, it's super dark. It's about kind of going through the dark forests of life. And something about being immersed in that stuff I needed to take me out of this nervous breakdown then took me into this joyful world of the kids' books. But, they are, in their own way, they're quite dark too. I mean, they're, like so many, I was going to say, like so many great children's books. I'm not saying mine are great. But, it's about kind of elemental forces. I tried not to do good versus evil because I think that's overdone and it demonizes groups. But I did want to look at, great battles and it's all the evil characters, all the complex, darker characters in the Worldquake sequence are publishers and booksellers and librarians.
Well, that's what I always admired about Pullman in his Dark Materials, that it wasn't. There were characters who did evil things and possibly were evil, but there was more to them than that. It wasn't just, that was the only way they operated in the world. And there was a kind of hinterland and reasons and a kind of structure behind, not just these people here, yay, they're the good ones. Those people there, boo, they're the bad ones. I loved the way he messed with that. So Oligarchy, that's the boarding school story. And it was slightly alarming to read that. I mean, how did you sort of update it by talking to girls currently at boarding school? I mean, they're really obsessed with their, facial skincare routines and using their TP brushes and things like that. And yeah, I just found it fascinating, but it sounded very, very high maintenance for these girls.
Yeah, well, I guess it is. I mean, it always has been, but it must be worse now. I mean, I think I just spent a lot of time on Instagram and internalized the kind of world that these girls would be living in now. And the types of messages that well, when I say now, I mean, it was 2019. So, I mean, things move so fast now, but 2019 it was published. So I was writing it in 2018. And yeah, the types of things that you would pick up from celebrities and how I think things have changed quite a lot just in the last few years, but how a certain type of body shape is important, and thin spo, and all of the kind of ways in which social media makes it easier to have an eating disorder and to be anorexic, to the extent that, I mean, Instagram kept deleting certain hashtags like thinspo, and hashtag thigh gap was one that you couldn't search, but girls would, I mean, it's mainly girls would find a way of getting around that and inventing new hashtags, and then kind of reveling in this awful world of anorexia and eating disorders where they'd egg each other on, and that's kind of what it was like. I mean, you'll remember as well at boarding school, everyone was on a diet, so it's Monday and we're all doing the potato diet, or it's, the following Monday we're all doing the sandwich spread diet. Do you remember sandwich spread?
Oh,
so gross.
yeah.
Or, only eating those weird little kind of pates what were those things called? Oh, pastes that you would get, like fish paste,
meat paste, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
meat
Potted
paste.
meat,
Well,
potted
yes,
meat.
all of
Woo.
yeah. God. And the terrible things we used to put in our sandwich toaster in our fifth form common room. And how, so what I want to do with Oligarchy, but you can see how, like, I'm losing readers with every book now, because with the Seed Collectors, it was these quite unlikable people, and then in Oligarchy they've all got anorexia. So but what I wanted to do was something that you shouldn't really be allowed to do, I guess, and that was to look for the humor and the camaraderie, and but also the kind of groupthink behind groups of girls and eating disorders, and how much fun it is to be in a group when you're that age and to sort of play at having an eating disorder, and then how much fun it is to have a real eating disorder at first, because what people don't ever really say is that eating disorders are like any other kind of addiction. At first it's fun and it gives the thing that it promises, otherwise people wouldn't do it. And I think I wanted to explore, how that works, particularly for young women. It's not all doom and gloom. It's, it's a joyful expression of something at first, and then obviously it's awful and tragic. I just wanted to shine a light on it in a new way, and to use humor to explore something that you're not usually really allowed to be funny about. But it was a huge risk, actually, and halfway through writing it, I looked at what I'd done and I thought, this is a terrible mistake. I can't possibly write this, but I can't show it to anyone. And then I think I left it for a few days and came back and thought, no, there was a reason for doing this. I'm going to plow on, and I did. And then it did end up being something that I'm really proud of. And actually, it's probably the best reviewed book I've had, particularly in the States, actually. I only got one bad review for the book, which was unfortunately in The Guardian, but which everyone reads. But everywhere else, people really did embrace this experiment. So, I was very grateful for that, because it is hard to take a risk. And so it made me think, I'll be more comfortable taking risks in the future, but then probably everyone will hate it. Anyway, but
there's
no,
a
I was
super
really
rich,
pleased with the response.
there's a super rich character in it as well, isn't there? A girl
Yeah.
who's from this sort of questionable background, but was that quite fun to write?
Yeah, so the central character, Natasha, she's just discovered that she's got this oligarch father. So she's Russian, and she's been flown to this boarding school. And I mean, this comes partly out of my own experience, which is that, I was your average kid that went to the local comprehensive. And then when I was 12, I found out that my dad was not a super rich oligarch, but was a kind of quite glamorous and semi-rich guy that who worked in the music industry. And my mum had had a kind of dalliance with him, and so I ended up going from one world to another quite quickly, and that was how I ended up going to boarding school. I only went for 2 years, so I grew up in a council flat in Barking in East London / Essex, and then moved to Chelmsford with my mum, my stepdad, then discovered this real dad, this biological dad. And the only way I could translate that into fiction was to make Tash Russian and to make her come from quite a far away, different place. And then to be plunged into this British minor boarding school and to enable us to see that environment from an outsider's perspective as well. But yeah, when I was researching the book, I was reading was it maybe in London Grad or something like that, but a book about Russian oligarchs in London. And there was just this throwaway line about how you might something about helicopters, and then you might just buy a house in Surrey for your ex-wife to live in and then send your daughter to boarding school. And it was just the idea that these women would be just compartmentalized, just kind of put in institutions of some sort, that you would fly around on your helicopter doing your business deals while your daughter languished in a boarding school, and you wouldn't ever know about the sandwich spread and the terrible diets and all of that. So yeah, that was kind of where that book came from.
And would you say that was another literary novel, or was it a kind of YA novel? I did read it in a way as a very good YA novel.
Bad Suzi.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there's that thing, just because the characters are teenage, it doesn't mean that the readers are teenage. It's a fabulous book anyway. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
But I suppose it's a publishing thing in a way. Like publishers, sometimes you see how a book has been published and think, oh, it isn't quite that.
I think it would be, probably in this case, I think it would be irresponsible to publish it as a YA book, because it's very triggering about eating disorders, and it is sort of, it's not deliberately triggering in a sense that, hey, I want somebody to read it and go out and explore having an eating disorder, but it's written for the type of person who has possibly gone through that and come out the other side. So I heard from a lot of women and a few men and other people, but mainly it was women of maybe our kind of ages, saying, oh, this absolutely captures what it was like to be at school, and in fact I've lived with this all my life and no one's ever talked about it. And so that was interesting to hear that I'd sort of got something about that right. But I think for somebody who's still in that age group, I don't know. I think it could be borderline kind of damaging. I don't know. I have heard from parents of younger people who've read it and they found it funny and thought that it was their own world being satirized. So maybe I've just forgotten how clever you are when you're young. I don't know. But I specifically didn't give it to a young relative recently who wanted to take a book of mine home on the train. And I was like, here's PopCo, and hid all the copies of Oligarchy.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there's some very edgy stuff in the world of YA, but I guess maybe it's how you, whether it's presented as having a solution at the end, or whether it's all neatly tied up, or whether there's a sort of, here's what you do in this situation, and that's sort of not where you're going with it, I guess.
No, it's really hard to pinpoint what makes something one type of book rather than another, because I think you're right, YA is very sophisticated now and, probably darker than, the darkest adult fiction in some ways. By the way, never write anything that isn't adult fiction, because when you do, you have to talk about your other fiction as adult fiction. It sounds like you're talking about rice and porn. My latest adult book.
Yeah, Penthouse Publications.
A brown paper bag. Yeah. But there's something about, I think there's also something about the kind of experiments of language or sentence structure in Oligarchy as well, that it's you're meant to kind of linger over the pages in a way, or to find the awkwardness of some of the sentences kind of funny. And again, I think that's speaking to somebody who's read a lot of books. But again, I might be wrong. You never know who's going to find your books. And of course, many YA readers have read thousands of books. I hadn't at that age, but some people have.
To change the topic slightly, because these are really books of ideas, and in many ways you've kind of been at the forefront of thinking in fictional terms about the modern world. I thought I'd ask you about AI and whether that is going to be a threat to fiction writing, or how it's going to impact education that we're both involved in. But have you? I'm sure you would have leapt in and had a go and tried a few things straight away.
Well, not straight away. My brother, who loves tech, was telling me about this thing that can write your emails for you. I was like, that sounds amazing, but I've got too many emails to reply to. I can't engage with that right now. So I think I came to it a bit later than other people, and possibly had the same experience as other people, where I was like, what is this? How do you use it? Oh, right, you can ask it to write an angry letter to your bank. And I mean, for that kind of thing, it's great, because if you're, I don't know, essentially talking to another AI, why not get your own AI to do it, and then you can go off and write your books. And obviously you experiment. I think I asked GPT to write a dystopian novel set in an agricultural community, and it called it The Wranglers, which was quite sweet. And
how long was this novel?
Oh, I think I just asked for a summary. Yeah. But this is all moving so fast. I mean, even admitting that I played with an AI to write fiction is sort of slightly problematic now, because I think, a lot of people feel that AI could essentially take our place, as writers. I mean, on the evidence of what I got mine to come up with, no, it was terrible. It's hilariously terrible. But but the fear is that the technology will get more sophisticated, and I do have lots of thoughts about this, but I think they're probably all wrong for the moment, or they're just, I mean, I'm not quite as frightened as many people are, because I think that art, or good art, always comes out of the tragic struggle of what it means to be human, you know, that Nietzsche stuff again, the primal oneness and so on. And that AIs just can't possibly feel that. But, you know, I'm usually wrong about most things, so it's probably going to be dreadful, just like everyone says. And I'll just be like, oh, I felt quite, you know, not worried about this. And then boom, the world ends. So, yeah, I'm very interested in it.
I asked again fairly early on for a pastiche, or, you know, write a poem in the style of T.S. Eliot. I can't remember what the topic was. And I thought, well, that'd be easy because he just picked quotes from lots of other sources. So that sort of is what we're talking about here. But as soon as it heard the word poem, it just sort of went da-dum, 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 and it all rhymed. It was all in quatrains. And so, but as you say, you know, that was very early days. And the other one was to write a short story in the manner of Hemingway. And of course, there were all these redundant words and phrases that you'd never have got past Hemingway in a million years. But who knows?
I mean, there's an argument that if an AI can write it, then a human shouldn't, or a human should be doing something better than that, I suppose. So, you know, a really optimistic view of it is that it pushes us as artists and creators to be, you know, better than something that a machine can do. But on the other hand, you know, it's just another example of something where human labour is being replaced by machines. Like I was at Wellington Airport back in January, and you have to print out your own luggage tags and put them on your bags now. And you just think, oh, wasn't it nice when a person just used to do that and smile at you? And I don't want to have to press the buttons myself. And, you know, just so I think there are so many jobs where it's just nicer to have a person doing it and feeling useful, even if a machine could do it, which I guess is a much more sophisticated version of that is what the writers' strike in the US is about at the moment.
They can always see me coming at airports, and I'm sort of looking at the machine and not figuring out, and somebody has to come over and help anyway. So I always get that one-on-one thing. Somebody sort of goes, you know, I'll do it for you. And they sort me out. But yeah, it's sort of de-glamorizing, actually. The whole thing is it's making everything very functional, which, like, air travel didn't used to be. It used to have more glamour and more specialness to it, I think. Anyway, well, let us wrap up with my three final questions for everyone. So the first question is favorite artwork. Do you have one?
Well, I found this quite hard to think about, and I've got a short list.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, one is Duchamp's Fountain, which is Marcel Duchamp's sculpture, which is basically just a urinal that he signed with Armats and said this is an artwork. And I love all that kind of thing. See, and well, don't quote me on this, but I was going to say an AI couldn't do that. I mean, probably they will. Anyway, and then also when the K Foundation burned £1 million in a weird furnace on Jura and then turned it into a strange block, I think those kinds of art stunts I really love. But then I like, you know, much more traditional things like Tintoretto's Crucifixion, which I saw in Venice, which is amazing, and Hieronymus Bosch. Anyway, you only wanted one, but one of those, Garden of Earthly Delights, perhaps.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, your Book of Shame, the book that you should have read by now. Well, we could say it was the Magus, but you've probably got another candidate.
No, why don't we go with the Magus? Because then that'll make me feel like I should read it. Although I've only just I've only just started reading Iris Murdoch for the very first time.
Yeah.
So yes, so I'm halfway through the Sea. But I felt before I started that, I thought that Iris Murdoch was a big sort of gap for me. So there's that.
Is it pulling you in? Because I think it was the Martin Amis idea that they all seem the same, and it's all Horatia and Quentin and Persephone and so on and so forth, and everybody's upper middle class and they're all reading things in original languages, and then about 25 pages in, you're just completely hooked. You just can't help it. Are you hooked yet?
I think I am hooked. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm interested at the moment in women writing from the perspective of men. So women writing male characters, because that's what I'm doing in the book that I'm working on now. And I've done it a bit over the years, just with more minor characters. But this is an entire book from the perspective of a guy called Jay. So yeah, the Sea is a first person book from the perspective of Charles Araby, who's quite a complex chap. Anyway, I've got a kind of sense of dread about what's going to happen later. But anyway,
sort of thanks to me, really. But yeah, I'll be very interested.
Thanks to you. I know. I'm scared now every time I pick it up. Suzi says something terrible and life changing happens in this book that ruined her life.
You'll probably go
quite like that. Oh, I don't know.
It'll probably be fine. And say finally, what's the most bizarre or weird or funny feedback you've had about any of your writing or your work generally?
Someone got a line from Our Tragic Universe tattooed on their collarbone.
Wow. What was the line? And did they kind of proudly show you it in a signing queue or something?
No, I think, did I get a photograph on email, something like that? It was the line, "We only need fiction because we die." Which is I was quite pleased when I wrote that line. I was quite chuffed. I thought, you know what, that's true. That's very Nietzsche. In fact, that goes back to the whole AI question as well, about, mortality and, being an organism and grappling with that and what that brings to art. So anyway, I quite approved of that. But I've had a few End of Mr. Y tattoos. I don't mean I've had them, but readers have had them. So there's some Apollo Smintheus out there.
Wow.
But yeah, I loved that as a response.
That's kind of nice. That's a good response. Have you ever had any sort of bizarre misreadings?
No. I've actually been really lucky over the years with my 37 readers, because they've all been really quite nice to me. And there was one low point back in the early 2000s, but apart from that, everyone's very polite, very serious, very sweet. Yeah, I expect when you have rather more readers than I've got, then statistically you get more problematic people. But yeah, my ones are just lovely.
Okay, well, we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much for dropping into the book bag, Scarlett, and can't wait for the next one. So April next year. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, maybe you can come back and talk about it then.
Oh, that'd be excellent. Thank you so much for having me. It's been just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful chat. So, I mean, all those books are fabulous, and we've made them sound fabulous. But maybe Scarlett doesn't want you to read them. I want you to read them, though, and let's sort of get that number of 37 up. By hook or by crook. Let's get my number of subscribers up. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and please like this, and please join me next time in the book bag for another talk with a fascinating author. Thanks and goodbye.